Hello and welcome to those of you who are joining us for this webinar. We're just waiting for the start time officially at 12 o'clock and we're just waiting for a few more people to join us, but welcome to the ones that are already here. We've got more and more people joining us as I speak, but we are now live and this session is being recorded. So we'll just give it a few more minutes. Okay, we'll make a start. It's 12 o'clock. We've got a lot to get through in an hour and a half. So welcome to everybody who's joining us to this West Midlands Business Festival webinar. As you can see here on this slide, there are some hashtags. So if you want to just post on social media and tag the Business Festival, and then do use those hashtags below. So I'm now going to make a start. This webinar is about your 7-step roadmap to being a sustainable business. I'd like it to be an interactive webinar, so I've got a couple of areas during the slides where you can get involved and engaged in the discussions, and we'll hopefully have a Q&A at the end as well. So let's get started on this. Just a few introductions. I'm on the webinar today. I'm hosting this session for you. My name's Denise Taylor. I'm co-founder of Wylde Connections, which is a sustainability consultancy and learning organisation. And essentially we help businesses to put their sustainability strategies in place. And then we also help them to implement those across all their business operations. So quite a big job involved in doing that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this webinar. I'm joined on this webinar by my co-founder and my daughter, Charlotte Taylor. So she's operating behind the scenes doing all the technical stuff. So I'll blame her if anything goes wrong technologically. But she's joining me on the call today. And throughout this session, please do use the Q&A box to ask any questions, and we'll answer them at the end, or try my best to answer them at the end. And we'll use the chat facility as well, because there's a couple of questions I'd like to raise in the chat facility. But just as we're getting going, please do put in the chat who you are, where you're from, where you're based, and just, you know, use this as a little bit of a networking opportunity as well. The whole ethos of this business festival is that we share knowledge, we share ideas, and we get to know one another, and we use this as a networking opportunity as much as anything else. So I've got a packed schedule for you today, and anybody who's attended any of my webinars before know that I like to cram a lot of really valuable information into these sessions. So that's what I'm going to do today. So there's lots of practical takeaways for you. Hopefully I will take you through a process that will help you embed sustainability in your business, no matter where you're at on that journey. So we're going to be looking at what sustainability is and what's the difference between sustainability and ESG. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I always focus on the key business drivers, because one of the questions that we get asked more than any other question is, what does this mean for my business commercially? So how do I gain commercial advantage from having sustainability embedded in my business and across my operations? Because this isn't just a bolt-on, this is about having it part of your business planning and helping you to become a better business, more responsible, more ethical, with better governance. Essentially, that's what sustainability is all about. We will touch on sustainability, the bigger picture, because We need to understand the reason we're doing all of this. It's great to be talking about net zero and for us all to be doing our carbon emissions and becoming less bad and having reduced impacts. But there's a much bigger picture to sustainability than just being less bad. So I will touch on some of those bigger issues, but bring them right back down to how this affects our businesses on an individual level. And no matter what size of business you are as well, it just doesn't affect larger businesses. This is affecting every one of us right now, whether we're sole traders, SMEs, or large corporates. Then we'll dive into your sustainability roadmap. We've been working for the last 6 years or so, and me personally, I've been working on this stuff for a long time now. So just bringing in some really practical steps to help you on your journey and try and dispel all those myths and misconceptions about what sustainability is and how it can become part of the business process. And finally, we'll touch on next steps, what you can do, and take that forward. You'll be able to take away your actions from that. We'll also have a Q&A at the next steps. So to kick off and to get you a little bit involved and to get you thinking, what I'd really like you to do is drop into the chat what sustainability means for you at this point in time. Why are you here today? What does this mean for your business? And as part of this, what I'm trying to get at is, what are we seeing as the key drivers that are driving business forward into having to report on ESG, to embed sustainability? What are you feeling in your individual businesses right now? And just drop into the chat whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and we can start to look at that. That's great. I'm looking off to the side now, so forgive me. So yeah, lots of people joining. Hi, Sarah. From CHH. Andrew, we know you, Andrew. Thank you for joining us. Solihull Council, quite a few people now jumping on board. This is great. Vicky from Bided. Hi, Amelia. Amelia is one of our placement students from Birmingham University. Hi, Mohammed. Okay, so do please put in the chat what you're feeling about sustainability today. What we're hearing at the moment at Wylde is the pressure is coming from the supply chain, from customers. That's one of the key drivers, and we're hearing that increasingly. We've got clients coming to us now saying, how can we answer the questions in this tender or this contract, or on PQQs, pre-qualification questionnaires. So that's a key driver at the moment. But equally, we have companies coming to us that, you know, they're very strongly values led and want to do the right thing. And it can be a combination of these things as well. It doesn't have to be either or. Great. Excellent. Thank you for that. We will come back to that towards the end, but that's really helpful and really useful. So thank you. So diving into what is sustainability and ESG, this is another question we get asked quite a lot, and the terminology is interchangeable at the moment. There's also a lot of controversy about the language and terminology we're using around sustainability and ESG. So I've put together a couple of brief definitions of what this means, but in essence, sustainability is that much bigger picture. It's the broader sense of being values driven and about meeting present needs without compromising future generations. So it's that bigger picture look at it, and looking at the risks and opportunities. So we go much broader than ESG, which is environment, social and governance, which essentially is providing us with framework for doing our reporting. So we're very often asked for environmental data like our emissions, carbon data, and our waste management policies, that kind of stuff. And then on the social side, we're asked for social metrics. And then on the governance side, you're being asked for all your policies and processes and being able to back up what you're claiming about your business with uploading your policies to various frameworks or whatever you're doing on tenders and contracts. So the ESG is very much the metrics side of it. It's the reporting, although we do use the two terms interchangeably. And so it's just, whatever sustainability means to you. They're two of the differences that people ask me about quite frequently. So looking at the key business drivers and coming back to that original question, what are we seeing at the moment? And what we're seeing at Wylde, and what we've done a lot of research on, is legislation right now is driving a lot of the activity. And the larger companies that meet certain thresholds on the legislation are having to comply on a mandatory basis. So they're legally required to report on their ESG credentials. What that means is that they then need that data to be able to do that, and they need to get that data from their stakeholders, and that means you, if you're in those supply chains as a supplier. So when you come down to satisfying supply chain demands, you're feeding that information upstream. Now, if you're an SME in that supply chain, you might not be meeting the thresholds for reporting, but you will be being asked to provide that data. And this is happening now across most sectors. There are still some sectors that are a little bit behind, and there are some areas within those sectors that does have a lag, but increasingly we're seeing companies being asked for this data right down the supply chain. Now, if you're not having to report on a mandatory basis, what that means is you can not report if you don't want to your customers, but it means you may not be on their preferred supplier list. So there's a commercial penalty there, but if you are able to demonstrate your credentials, then there's a commercial advantage. So it's just understanding that and understanding where you're at. Increasingly, we're seeing ESG and sustainability being used to enhance brand reputation. We're seeing this push now from many people to have eco-friendly products, green products. There's a lot of conversation around companies being responsible and ethical, and so that's all about brand reputation. And the ones that get it wrong do suffer from this. And this all comes back to you monitoring your supply chains and not having modern slavery in your supply chains and all of those kind of things. And then recruiting and retaining skilled staff is fairly self-explanatory. If you've got a well-run organisation with a good, strong culture, then you're more likely to recruit and retain staff and for them to stay loyal with you and want to work with you on a long-term basis. So I've just unpacked this a little bit more for you. So what we're seeing in terms of the pressures on business, increasing legislation. So that compliance I've already spoken about. There are economic incentives and penalties arising from that. But we're also seeing changing global markets. We've seen supply chains moving quite a lot significantly due to the geopolitical tensions that we've seen in recent months. And so we're seeing that tension, but we're also seeing an increase in supply chain standards. So a lot of larger companies are using standards and frameworks to help shape what they're presenting and the data they're gathering. Increasing competition. So if you're able to demonstrate your ESG credentials, if you're able to demonstrate that you're sustainable, what is likely to be the case is that you've got good governance, you're an ethical and responsible business, strong values, culture, strong culture, and your values led. And you're looking innovatively at business models. You might be diversifying, you might be looking at new business models, which I'll touch on a little bit later. You're seeing enhanced efficiencies and cost savings, so that's making your business more resilient over time, so you're more future looking. And then I've already touched on brand reputation, so that's also about managing your risk management. But within that brand reputation and enhancement, you've also got collaborative opportunities within your market. So making the most of those in your networks really helps to strengthen your business and make it more resilient. So what this means in a nutshell, when you're looking at demonstrating your ESG credentials, is that the larger companies have a mandatory requirement to prove their credentials, then we're coming down that supply chain where you have to demonstrate to your customers and possibly to other stakeholders like investors, your banks or whatever. And then woven throughout that, if you're doing all this stuff and you're sustainable, you're ethical, you're responsible, why not shout about it? And why not showcase what you're doing? At Wylde, we have clients where they've been awarded a King's Award for sustainability. We've got several of them now, just because they've put all this in place, they've put their strategies in place, they've really embedded it, and they can really demonstrate what they're doing. So they're now able to win awards because of all the great work they've done, embedding sustainability truly across their operations. So just unpacking this a little bit more, and it can be very, very daunting when you're trying to navigate your way through all this increasing legislation that's happening and all the frameworks that are being thrown at us. And this is just in relation to ESG and sustainability. So it really has become an alphabet soup. And even us, as you know, we're doing this, we're living and breathing this every single day at Wylde. We're sustainability specialists, and for us to try and navigate our way through is quite daunting. So let alone if this is not where your area of specialism is. But we're here to help if you need any help on all of that. I'll move quickly on to what that actually means to your business and unpack some of the legislation that is currently affecting UK businesses. And Charlotte's going to drop in the chat an ebook that we freely give out to people that unpacks the navigating sustainability reporting. So do take a look at that after this webinar. It gives you all the thresholds that you need to understand. We are in the process of updating the ebook, but it's relevant as at this point in time, but we're going to add a little bit more information in. But for now, that would be enough for you to have a look at and see where you're at in terms of your reporting requirements. But this unpacks that a little bit. What we're seeing most commonly is the SECR, Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting, of businesses that are meeting those thresholds. There's 2 out of 3 thresholds that you meet in order to have to report on the SECR reporting. If you're going for public tenders, public sector tenders, then you will probably need to really look at PPNs, and there's several of them. So really drill down into those. And there's a lot of guidance on public sector contracts in what you need to do to be able to compete and bid for these tenders and contracts within that public sector. Lots of other pieces of legislation. There's taxes, there's CBAM, there's the UK plastic packaging tax. All of these are now impacting on us as businesses, and particularly across certain sectors. Happy to answer any questions on any of these. If there's any further technical information, then I'll refer it to a member of my team. But if you do need some support on that, do let us know. So I'm moving quickly through this part of the webinar because I want to get on to the roadmap as quickly as we can. But what I'd like to do first of all is just let's put the bigger picture into context. Why are we doing all of this? Why does it matter? Why do we need to be sustainable? And what does that mean from a business point of view, as well as a human point of view? What does it mean to us as individuals, as human beings? And what we're seeing now are increasing threats and pressures globally. So I think most of us are, if we've not experienced floods directly, we're aware of the flooding that's going on just throughout the UK, let alone in other parts of the world, and the knock-on effects of what floods mean. These are extreme weather events, so we're seeing wildfires, we're seeing droughts. What does that mean for business in terms of, you know, being future resilient? If we've got a drought and you're a business that has a manufacturing business that uses a lot of water consumption, you may be needing something to keep an eye on what that might mean in the future for you if there's water scarcity, for example. Wildfires are affecting us. Biodiversity loss is in the news a lot at the moment. It's an existential threat, as is climate breakdown. And what does that mean for us as businesses? Pollution, there's a lot of media attention on pollution and how there's no environment on Earth at the moment that hasn't been affected by human activity. And what will that mean in the future? And we're also seeing a lot of societal pressures. And when you look at the global mega forces, which I'll go on to in a moment, there's lots of movement in terms of the societal pressures. Things like the geoeconomic confrontations that we're seeing, and we're seeing societal polarization. There's a lot of politicization of all of that. As we know at the moment, there's conflicts throughout the world. All of these potentially impact on us as businesses, and they do so because they lead to things like supply chain disruptions and scarcity of resources. So we need to be really aware of this bigger picture of what these risks and threats have the impacts on our business. This particular slide comes from the World Economic Forum Global Risks Perception Survey. So suggest you take a look at that. It's freely available. You can download it. Just Google WEF Global Risk Perception Survey. It was released in January, so it's very, very recent and relevant. And looking ahead over the long term, the perceptions are that what we're going to see is more extreme weather events. We're going to see ecosystem collapse from biodiversity loss, and there are critical changes to Earth systems. In our teachings and other webinars, we do talk about planetary boundaries and our ecological boundaries, and this all ties in with those ecological boundaries when we're talking about critical change to Earth systems, and this is all impacting on us as human beings, but we're all working, we're in communities, and so it impacts on our businesses as well. It's not all doom and gloom, thankfully. You'll be pleased to hear there are lots of business opportunities, but when we're running businesses, we need to be aware of the risks as well as the opportunities. So I like to just put all of that into context so we can be prepared. We can take measures for adaptation and for mitigation to mitigate those risks and reduce them. But I'm not going to focus too much on those today. It's about good governance and what you need to do. What I'd like to focus on is more on the opportunities side and how we can move forward in becoming sustainable and ethical and responsible. So maximizing our opportunities. This slide shows you the pressures. These are the global mega forces. It's not a definitive list. This is just some of the key areas that are the mega forces. But you can see down into that middle column how this does impact on us. It does lead to volatility and margin pressures. We're seeing tariffs all over the place at the moment coming out of America, and tit for tat tariffs going on, which affect us in terms of cost and volatility, increasing regulatory and reporting requirements, and all of this has a knock-on effect on supply chains, and it does put constraints on our production and growth. But on the other side of that coin, we have opportunities as well. So maximizing our business opportunities, let's really drill into this, because sustainability, if you're running a good business, your products are in demand or your services are in demand, and you have everything in place and you understand sustainability and how it's embedded across your operation and what it means from a competitive advantage point of view, what you're likely to see is some of these areas here on this slide. So you're likely to be winning or retaining business if you can demonstrate your credentials and provide your customers with the information that they needed, taking the headache away from them. So if you can give them that information, who's going to be on their preferred supplier list? You're going to reduce costs, you're going to have savings and efficiencies, you're going to look at different ways of operating and how you process things. So you'll have energy efficiencies, excuse me, operational efficiencies, and you start to look innovatively at things like alternative low-cost raw materials. And we're seeing that more and more now as technology advances and gives us opportunities to look at new and different materials that have lower impact. Enhanced reputation I've spoken about quite a bit. The emerging factors we're seeing are the leveraging of technology, and you'd have to be really asleep not to know that AI is moving forward rapidly at the moment. But how can we take advantage of that from a sustainability point of view? We're aware that there is a cost to the growing impact of AI. There's energy and water efficiency costs and impacts on us, but there are a lot of positives as well when we start to drill down into what AI can do for our businesses, and that's across many different sectors. When you're looking at manufacturing and automation and putting processes in place, but also across agriculture. AI is being used massively across agriculture at the moment, and helping with crop yields and etc., and having a much less impact on nature and biodiversity. So there's lots of areas we can look at in terms of maximising business opportunities. But if you have your strategies in place and you can report on those, you're already seeing a competitive advantage at this point in time. Businesses are starting to catch up, but getting ahead on this stuff is really advisable. So let's get into what you're all here for today, which is to look at your 7-step sustainability roadmap. And here it is. So what I'd like you to do now in the chat is just take a couple of minutes just to have a look at this. We're going to unpack each step as we go through this webinar. It's a staircase. But what I'd like you to do is just take a look, and if you're comfortable sharing, let us know which step you think you're on at the moment in your business. I don't want to preempt where I think you might be. You might also be kind of between steps, and there are a lot of businesses that are doing a lot of the things that are in steps 5, 6, and 7, but they might not have put all their policies and processes in place, so they might be lower down the staircase. But do share, if you feel comfortable doing so, where you think you're at the moment. It'd be really interesting to see where you're at. I'm just going to scroll up on the chat. Okay, so please do share where you think you're at. Just give you another couple of minutes just to have a look at that. Thank you, Jane. Great, good to see that some are around 4. Thank you, David. You're looking at 3. Yes, there's a lot of customer-driven action at the moment because we're seeing lots of tenders and contracts asking for ESG data. Thank you, Ronnie. Great, thank you, Andrew. Great, that's really useful. That reflects what we've been seeing through the last few years of working with companies on this. We've used this staircase. This is the latest iteration of it, but we've been using this model for quite some time. And what we find when we go into a business is that they're usually somewhere between 3 and 4, steps 3 and 4. They're starting to be asked for the information and having to respond to that. We do have some clients as well that were already upon step 6, but they hadn't articulated or pulled together their formal strategy. So now they've got that all pulled together. They're reporting on it, and I'll show you a couple of those a little bit later, a couple of case studies and reports that you can download to show best practice. So that will help you on your journey as well. Great, thank you for that. Thank you for participating. So just going into each of the steps, I'm going to try and give you practical support and takeaways on this, on each of the steps. This isn't, again, it's not definitive, it's just to try and help you clarify your thinking on embedding sustainability across your operations. So step 1 is about pre-compliance. Typically, this would be for a startup or sole trader business where they're just getting going. They've not got everything in place yet, and they're needing to look at where they stand on their regulations and what they need to put in place. So you'll have the usual, general stuff from running a business of registering with Companies House or with HMRC and all of those compliance issues. But from an ESG point of view, it would be really helpful to understand what might be coming down the line from in terms of reporting, and depending where you want to take your business. It's generally not the case that if you're already established, you're going to be pre-compliant. However, there is a caveat to that, because the legislation is increasing so much, and we're seeing businesses now being caught out. They've reached certain thresholds, for example, on the SECR reporting, where they run the risk of not being compliant just because they haven't understood what the legislation is. And so they've gone beyond a certain headcount, and their turnover's increased and their balance sheet has increased. They're meeting 2 out of those 3 threshold criteria, and suddenly they've become non-compliant. So that would make them, rather than pre-compliance, non-compliant. So you really need to understand ESG regulations and your legal requirements relevant to your business. Now, if you're a manufacturing business and you've got ISO 14001 in place, you're likely to have a legal register, and you may be covering some of this off. And if you're established, you will have your waste management policies and processes in place, that kind of stuff. And you may be reporting on some of your social metrics. There are some really, really good resources on LinkedIn in particular. There's some great people to follow on LinkedIn. And I would suggest, if you really want to understand legislation, start looking at LinkedIn. If you just, you can use LinkedIn as a search tool as much as a networking and business development platform. So do go on there and start to search ESG reporting, sustainability reporting, and put that into the posts. One of the people, there are many that we follow, but one of the experts that we follow is a guy called David Carlin, Carlin, and he does some really great graphics on what's happening currently in the legislative regulatory environment. So do go and follow him. He's got a great Substack account. Substack is a blogging platform. So if you follow him on Substack as well as LinkedIn, you'll get access to a lot of really great information. David works with governments as well as large corporates, but that all translates down into how SMEs can and other organisations. We've got councils have joined us on this webinar today, but it's a really great resource to understand where you need to be on the legislation. If you've got gaps, it goes without saying, you're jeopardising your business if you don't plug those gaps. So take action immediately. If you've come across a non-compliance issue or a pre-compliance, you need to close that gap straight away, because that's a threat to your business. Meeting your minimum and legal and operational standards. This is where you're starting to get into developing and formalizing your core ESG policies and procedures and ensuring that they meet the legal standards. And if you're being driven by your supply chain, customers in your supply chain, you can glean a lot of information from what they're asking you in the tenders and contracts and PQQs. What information are they asking for? And then you can start to put those policies in place that meet that demand, basically. So that will help you to put some of the key processes in place, set up your key policies. And we'd suggest at this stage that you would start to look at your KPIs across your reporting. So what are your monitoring mechanisms on this? And if you're doing things like measuring your carbon footprint and you're doing your GHG emissions, how can you gather that data more efficiently? That's what you need to be looking at. These are the things you need to be looking at when you're looking at compliance. And training is a key part of this. If you're a manufacturing business, you may be looking at ISO 14001. You might have that in place already. There is a legal requirement, for example, on the ISO standards for training, to train the staff, relevant staff on these things. But look at the broader training. How can you inform your staff, educate them, bring them on this journey right from the outset? This is the one where we're seeing more and more activity. This is the customer driven action. So we'll spend a little bit of time just unpacking this. And this is coming through tender requests, through pre-qualification questionnaires, and supplier codes of conduct, and they're asking for all sorts of information now. Previously, you might have been asked for environmental data and policies, but that's now becoming much broader, and we get clients coming to us saying we need to provide social metrics, we need to provide this, we need to provide that, and so it's now the case that sustainability is becoming front and center of any of these tenders and contracts. And what we're seeing in the supply chains across automotive, aerospace, professional services, even construction, what we're seeing is that more and more companies are asking for ESG benchmarking accreditations such as EcoVadis. We're seeing EcoVadis, which is a benchmarking platform. It's quite a rigorous benchmarking process that you have to go through to acquire EcoVadis. And we've been helping companies with this, with our diagnostic tools, to get that EcoVadis accreditation. And if you've got that, you can generally really give your customers anything they're asking for with regard to their tenders and contracts. And this is now becoming much more of an issue and policy. So I regularly attend conferences in manufacturing and construction, and what I've been hearing, and certainly in the last 12 months, is that the larger companies in those tier ones and the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers in automotive and aerospace and construction, is they've got these accreditations in place, and they expect their suppliers to have these accreditations in place as well. And we're seeing financial penalties as a result of not having those in place, or you don't end up on the preferred supplier list, or you miss out on that tender and contract. So really important that you understand all of this stuff, and it sounds very daunting, but essentially it's just having the data. You may be doing a lot of this stuff already, but not actually gathering the information in a way that you can present it. What we find when we go into companies, when we do the diagnostics, is there's a lot of information already there, and it's just a case of filling the gaps. So we do a gap analysis, and you can really just see what you need to do and the actions that you need to take to be able to present that data and that evidence-backed information. So at this point, if you've not already got to your baseline evidence and data, then I'd strongly recommend that you start looking at that right now. So the very, very basics is having an ESG action plan. So doing that gap analysis, doing the diagnostics on your business. Where are our gaps? How can we plug them to provide that data? And can we do our GHG emissions pretty quickly? Now, I would suggest that pretty much all businesses need to start looking at doing their carbon footprint. And I would highly recommend that you do it now across all 3 scopes. There's a lot of businesses that have done scopes 1 and 2, and a lot of the data that's being asked for may just ask for scopes 1 and 2, but it's going to become the case that you will need to do all scopes. And if you want to really capture all this data, look at your scope 3 GHG emissions data. Now, scopes 1, 2, and 3, scopes 1 and 2 is what you control. It's how you use your energy, what you control within your business. Scope 3 is what relates to your supply chain. The majority of it relates to your supply chain and your commuting and your business travel, all of those things. It's the more complex data to gather, and it's the most difficult data to gather. But if you start to put the policies, processes, and particularly the processes in place to gather that data, when it comes to presenting it in the future, you'll be able to just do it at the click of a button, basically, if you're using the right software. We use a piece of software called Carbon Alt Delete. It's very robust, it's very granular, it's very detailed. And literally, once we've got all the clients' data in, we can just produce whatever reports they want, including SECR reporting, which I mentioned to you earlier. So do make sure that you've got all that in place. That's the very basics, and it's not expensive to do that. I would suggest that you get that done and then build on that from there, which is what these steps are all about. It's about how do you make the start and how do you then build on it in order to get to that real integrated strategy step. The other key thing I want to talk about in this particular step, because we talk about providing data, and that's a pressure. That's customers asking you for information. It's another headache. You've got to find the data. You've got to put processes in place. I've heard even some companies saying to me, I don't want to be doing this. I don't need to be doing this right now. But what's missing out of this conversation very often is this is a market opportunity. If you can provide that data, who's going to stay on those supplier lists? But also, once you've got all that data, we've got clients in construction who were working with one particular large developer and they'd got all the information for them. What that meant was they could then go to other developers within that construction market and say, here we go, we've got all the data for you, we're leading on this, and can we work with you? And so it's identifying those market opportunities where demonstrating your ESG credentials does give that competitive advantage. And going back to that business case slide, that wheel that I showed you, you can do all sorts of presenting around that in terms of how you approach things, how your values led. People work with people, and they work with organizations that they trust. And so how can you build that? How can you build that trust, that credibility that you're a business that they really want to have on board as a supplier and they want to work with? So do use it as a market opportunity as well, and drill down and do that research into how you can provide all that information, take the headache away, but also show what a great business you are. So getting beyond compliance, we're starting now to move up that staircase. You've probably done at this stage, you've done your baselines, you've got the data, you may have a lot of this in place already for those of you on this webinar. But then getting beyond compliance, you're starting to think more strategically. You're starting to engage with your stakeholders a lot more strategically. You're starting to really look at where the competitive advantages are. When we work with clients, once we've done that GHG emissions calculation, very often what comes out of that process is how can we streamline this? How can we make it more efficient? How can we make it more effective? Lots of tools available to be able to do that. But this is where you're then developing those processes. You're starting to do really, really robust reporting. You're probably all starting to engage with your employees and stakeholders as well to identify their priorities. You're starting to get into what's known as materiality, which is part of this whole sustainability strategy work. A materiality assessment, which we do for clients, is looking at what's important and to your business and to your stakeholders, but what these impacts mean both financially and in terms of what they mean for the environment and society. So when you're starting to engage with your stakeholders and you're looking at what's material, you start to see how you can improve your business processes. You're starting to look at resilience. You're starting to look at innovations. You may be looking at new product development. All of these things are all starting to take shape when you're beyond compliance, and all of those processes are bedded in. And then you can start to look at alternative business models. You're starting to embrace circular economy thinking. You may be doing this already. This is just about pulling everything together. As I mentioned, we have a lot of clients who they're doing a lot of this stuff, but they've just not formulated it or fully articulated it. But when you're looking at moving forward and you're really embracing this from a business opportunity point of view, if you look at circular economy, there are lots of opportunities in circular economy depending on what type of business you are. And this is all about your value chain. How can you keep resources in the value chain? But then also, how can you look at across that value chain, how can we keep those resources in the value chain, but how can we also generate revenue from that? So, for example, one company's waste might be another company's resource, and keeping that within, it's out keeping materials out of landfill and keeping them from having to be disposed of at end of life. And a good example of this is one of our clients makes outdoor furniture from recycled plastic. So all the PET bottles and everything else, those plastic bottles that we discard so readily, have now been turned into really amazing, lovely furniture outdoors that's going to last for 60, 70, 80 years and not having to be replaced every 3 to 5 years if you have a wooden picnic bench or a set of tables or outdoor furniture. Servitization, how can you provide services across your value chain where you can generate revenue? So these are business models that you can start to look at innovatively, and how can you take advantage of the way things are going with renewable technologies and this emerging renewables market and green economies and greening the built environment. Lots of opportunities across many different sectors when you start to think about business models differently. On the servitization side, we're moving very much away from ownership of things to renting things, and there's revenue models there that can be maximized, and if you've got some creative thinking, innovative thinking on that, how can you look at your business models to take advantage of that? I'm conscious of time. So now we're getting further up the ladder, up the staircase. We're now at the point of embedding strategy. You've got all your evidence in place. You're starting to report. You really understand what you're doing. You've started to embrace different ways of thinking, exploring those. When you're at step 5, you're likely to have if not already, but starting to develop a robust sustainability strategy and action plan. And to develop that, you need to go through a whole process. This is something that needs to be embedded in your business planning. It's not a bolt-on. It's not a standalone. This is everyday business actions and behaviours that are embedded in your culture in order for us to make a difference and have positive impacts. So that needs to have some really robust thinking behind it. When we go through this process with the client, we involve senior leadership team members in this process, and we take them through a whole series of using business strategies and tools. So things like a SWOT and PESTLE analysis, if you do that with a sustainability lens on or an ESG lens, it's amazing what you can uncover. And that speaks back to the global mega forces I spoke about earlier. So when you're looking at a PESTLE analysis, which is looking at external factors on your business, you need to be forward thinking, you need to be thinking bigger. And so, and then bringing that back into your business. When you start to use those business tools, it's amazing what you can uncover and where you can mitigate risk, where you can take advantage of opportunities. Then you start to look at, okay, what's our value chain? Where are our resources? And looking along the value chain. So a value chain mapping exercise is probably one of the most valuable things you can do within your business, and particularly if you are using resources, if you're a manufacturing business, if you're a construction business, but even professional services companies can do a value chain map. So a value chain starts from your resources, those inputs into your business processes. You then have your inbound logistics and your suppliers. You have your operational processes. For manufacturing construction businesses, it's what you make, what you build. You have your outbound logistics. You have your product use. So you'll be using a building or you'll be using the products, and then you have end of life and disposal. So that's a value chain. Essentially, what we're doing in sustainability is measuring our impacts. That's what we're doing. If we understand our impacts across that value chain, which, as I say, is probably the most valuable thing you can do, you can start to look at the positive impacts that you're having across that value chain, but you will understand the negative impacts as well, and you will understand the risks and opportunities. So the risks might be, if you're looking at your value chain and you're a manufacturing business and you're working with metal or any other product like that, if you're taking stuff out of the ground or from natural resources, and it's coming into a supply chain, you need to make sure that those impacts are not having a negative effect on the communities and on the environment. So you need to really understand that beginning process of your value chain, and then right the way through where your emissions are, where your impacts are in the manufacturing process and your inbound and outbound logistics. And then at end of life, how can you keep those resources within the value chain? And essentially, if you can get that right, if you understand your impacts, then everything else around sustainability, that's essentially what sustainability is all about. It's understanding those impacts, it's mitigating the risks, it's maximizing the opportunities where you can, it's becoming responsible and ethical, it's about good governance, it's about proper processes and procedures. So when you look at sustainability from that perspective, it just makes good business sense. So what you need to do is then integrate that across your business plan. It's not a standalone, as I said, and really embed it into your company culture. Every business says that they have values, and the values lead to the culture. So if the values are lived and breathed, if we really embrace sustainability and we're being responsible and ethical, then those values will be reflected in the company culture. They also then are reflected in your social metrics, how you behave in society. So if you want to have positive impact on society and community, for example, that will be reflected in your culture, whether you're doing philanthropic activities, you're supporting charities, or you're allowing your staff to have volunteering days, or you're supporting charities, from within your business, whatever it may be. That's all reflected. It's all sustainability. This is all stuff you can put in your report and show that you're a really strong, good, resilient business. One of the tools that we use as part of this process, there's a number of frameworks as well as strategic business tools and methods that you can use. And one of the frameworks is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And within each of those goals, there are certain key actions. And what this provides is a really useful framework. The UN SDGs, as they're commonly known, were developed for countries. And not surprisingly, we're missing most of the targets on it. But what it provides for businesses is a very useful framework that you can relate back to your business. If you're in a supply chain and you're doing a sustainability impact report, and I'll show you a couple of examples of those that you can take away in a little while. If you map that within your sustainability reporting, corporates understand this stuff. They understand materiality assessments. They understand the UN SDGs and how this can be aligned to what you're saying about your ESG credentials. If you can reflect that in your language and how you're presenting your reporting, that will make them sit up and think, oh yeah, this is a business that we'd like to work with, because you're reflecting their language and the things that they have to report on. So again, we're looking at competitive advantage as well as being able to measure against actions and have these as part of your key performance indicators within your business. Again, good business, good governance. We should be doing this stuff anyway. So I hope that's useful in terms of embedding your strategy. Lots more we could talk about. Double materiality I've touched on. When you've brought all this together, if you bring all this together into your strategy and it's part of your business planning, what will come out of this is a very detailed action plan with assigned roles and responsibilities, with KPIs, key performance indicators, timelines on when you want your actions to be carried out. And I would put a caveat on this now, because the roadmap is probably one of the most important things you can do as well. I bore people to death with this phrase. This is a journey and it's not a destination. We're not being expected to do this stuff overnight. And this is why I say get your baselines right first of all, and then go from there. So it is a journey. And so if you start to look at it and start to look at your roadmap, look at your quick wins. What are we doing already that we haven't articulated that we can talk about now? What do we want to do in the next 12 months to 3 years? So your short to medium term, what actions can we take that we can realistically achieve? And then starting to look long term, when you look at net zero and decarbonisation strategies, they tend to have a longer term timeline. So when you're looking at your net zero and other actions, they're looking into the future, but along that you may have some stretch goals as well. So start to look at, if you've done your value chain mapping, your stretch goals should start to drop out of that in terms of the actions that you want to take over the longer term. And so really, put some thought into that roadmap. But if you've done the process right, then that should become fairly clear to you and fairly apparent of, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to achieve, what's realistic, what are the resources we have, how can we really action this, how can we achieve it. The next step is being values led. Now, most businesses probably are values led. Certainly we don't start businesses to have negative impacts, most of us anyway. There are some businesses out there that have very negative impacts, of course, but a lot of businesses tend to have some level of values, and they want to do the right thing, they want to have less impact, they want to even have positive impact. What needs to happen here is an alignment. So we need to have senior leaders and senior leadership teams really communicating their values, their individual and personal values. What does this mean to them? And then you've got company values, business values, and those two things should be aligned. You've also got brand values as well. So it's quite a complex area, but we need to see alignment between what business leaders are saying and what's actually happening on the ground. And if there's a real disconnect, then it can fall short. So this is why we always ask for senior leaders to be part of the process, that they've got to buy into this in order to take this along and empower staff and recruit from within, all of those kind of things, and really drive actions forward and help to change behaviours within the business that have positive impact and mitigate against those negative impacts. So this is the I guess the level where you would start to really invest in leadership development. We're now starting to see, thankfully, this is really refreshing to us, a lot of attention and focus on leadership development from a sustainability point of view, really raising the awareness of what sustainability means to leaders and managers within organisations. We're currently working with Coventry University to help embed some of this across a government department. So, this is really important stuff. If the leaders don't get it, if the leaders don't buy in to this, then it's going to be a struggle for the rest of the team to make these actions happen. So to be truly values led, to be truly integrated with your sustainability strategy, it needs that commitment, because there are some businesses that are going to have to take some very bold decisions and to back that up. Some of you be aware of Paul Polman, who was the CEO of Unilever, wrote a really good book called Net Positive, and he implemented as a business leader lots of processes within Unilever that had quite far-reaching impacts and effects on that business as a whole, and that's a very, very large business. So you can see that they were invested in it, and there are lots of other businesses that, if we're not working with, we know of, that have got that real high level buy-in, and you can see that impact, that they're having that positive impact, and you need to commit to that. And it's at this stage that you would look at the impacts on society and communities and what could you do better. And a lot of this stuff doesn't have to be expensive either. One of the key things is how much is this going to cost our business? But you can start to get creative, and if you empower your teams and your staff, they can very often take actions that are very positive, have positive impact on the community, on society, that are relatively low cost to the business, but have huge impact, huge positive impact. So this is about long-term value. It's about being committed to it. It's about driving strategy. It's about that cultural alignment. Then we get to the top of the staircase, and we're now getting into, I guess, what you could call being a leader in this journey. So you've got bold and credible, regenerative, market shaping leadership. This is where you see organizations really starting to have an impact in their supply chains and in their value chains. They're influencing both upstream in their supply chains and downstream. They're winning awards for what they're doing. They're sharing their knowledge and best practice. They're encouraging collaboration. And some organizations are even working collaboratively with competitors because they really believe that this is the right thing to do. They're driving innovation. They're changing their business models. They're looking at regenerative impact. So how can we add back to nature and the environment and communities and society? How can we actually add back? How can we give back? And how can we do things like sustainable product design? So how can we incorporate this into our whole process? So you're starting to see that real differentiated ESG, sustainability, said the terms were interchangeable, leadership. And it takes courage to do this stuff. You've got to really stand up and be out there. And we do see leaders that are, they've taken this path and they're really shaping what is happening in their business, and they're really influencing others to do so. It goes without saying that they're also influencing their suppliers within that supply chain, and they expect best practice. So you can look at some of those businesses. I haven't got time to share loads of case studies today, but if you want to get in touch with us later, we can show you some good examples. Either myself or my team would be very, very happy to engage on some of this stuff. So I'm back to the staircase, and having just gone through all of those steps in a little bit more detail, what I'd really like you to do is just share in the chat some of your thoughts and comments on this. We'll just spend a little bit of time on this. I'm conscious of time. And does everything we've been through, does that reflect what you said originally on where you are on steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, or even 7? Has it changed your thinking in any way? Do you think you're further up the staircase than you originally thought? Are you doing some of the stuff already, and so that you've got a mix of, well, we're doing some of 6 and 7, but we're actually on step 4? So how's that changing your thinking as we go along? Great, thank you, Jane. You're saying you're on a step 3 still, yeah. I know you're all muted at the moment, but if you do want to chat about, are you aiming for these higher steps, or are you comfortable with staying on step 3? What are the thoughts on this? And please do download the links that Charlotte's very diligently putting in the chat as well, in terms of what you're seeing on the chat. Lots of resources there that can help you with this process. Great, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we're seeing that Andrew has responded from Solihull Council, and with larger organisations like that, there is a mix. Different areas of different organisations are seeing that it's not uniform across an organisation at this point in time, and we are all on a journey. There's a lot of lag on all of this. Yes, Vicky, I'd say that's the case with you, that you are higher in terms of culture, but maybe the processes need to be put in place a little bit more. Thank you, Andrew. Great, thanks, Ronnie, for that feedback. That's good to see that you're reaching those steps 4 and 5 as well. You're getting beyond that. That's really good. Thank you, David. Excellent. Great. Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you for that feedback. That's really helpful. You will get these slides, so you can take this away and maybe work on this with some of your teams as well, and just get some real, internal stakeholder engagement. Part of the sustainability work you will be doing is really bringing every single member of your team on board with this. So do use these tools. You will get them freely available. Afterwards, we'll share the slides with you, as well as the recording from this webinar. To simplify that staircase, we've done a little bit of a roadmap that takes you through the journey. It is a very simple version of it. So just to recap on where you might be, very, very basics of doing your baselines. So you would do your diagnostics, your ESG diagnostics, and that would look at, what have we got in terms of our environmental policies, processes, procedures? What are we doing on our social impacts and metrics, and what are we doing on our governance? So you would do a gap analysis on the whole of your business. You'd do a diagnostic, you'd look at the gaps. That should then show you what actions you need to take, not just to plug those gaps, but then to move forward. So looking at your baseline, so that's the diagnostics, and then your baseline in terms of doing your GHG emissions. The trajectory of travel at the moment with regard to the legislation, and a lot of the conversation being around net zero and achieving net zero, which is aimed at countries and not businesses. Businesses will never get to net zero. but they're being encouraged to go on that journey. You would need to look at your GHG emissions, your carbon footprinting. So if you've not done your diagnostic already in your GHG emissions baselines, then try and get that done as soon as possible. And then simultaneously, you could start building your strategy if you've not done so already. And then you're starting that shift into moving up towards being having your strategy embedded, and you're starting to influence others. So very simple map, but hopefully it helps to dispel what this journey is all about. I do a lot of education around this carbon tunnel vision we have. We have a really great graphic, which I forgot to tell Charlotte to share with you, so apologies, I should probably scramble for it now, but I can share it later. From Bridget McKenzie, there's a really good graphic that demonstrates the carbon tunnel vision we've got perfectly, and it's a big circle and there's a looking through a lens, and the carbon tunnel vision is just one small part of it, and then everything else around it is reflecting what sustainability is really all about. But at the moment, what we're hearing across the media and from government is net zero, net zero, net zero. And when you look at net zero, that's just about being less bad. Do we just want to be less bad when we've got existential threats? I would say no, or we need to be pushing back. We need to be putting back into society. And at this point, I'm going to give a recommendation. There's a really great book that I've read recently by Richard Hardyment, Hardyment, called Measuring Good Business. And in the book, he talks about what we used to look at in terms of business was being of benefit to society and not just being about profit. And I think we've lost our way from that point of view, and we need to bring back in about talking about the benefit to society and the benefit to nature and the environment, and that's kind of got lost. So it's a really great book. It's only a very slim volume, but lots of really useful information, and particularly if you want to get this journey right and you want to get your reporting right, highly recommend you get a hold of that. Oh, thanks, Charlotte. She's put the Bridget McKenzie's graphic in there. Bridget McKenzie's graphic on the carbon tunnel vision looks at the ecological boundaries. She's situated it in the ecological boundaries. And another business model that reflects that and the social foundation is the donut economics model by Kate Rayworth. So again, if you can have a look at that, all of these things just help to shape your thinking. I'm trying to just give you practical tools and help and takeaways to help you put your strategies in place. Right, we're 1:10. Just going to show you a couple of very short case studies. We've got Sarah Sherwood on the webinar today. We've worked with CHH for a number of years, and Sarah is now responsible for their sustainability strategy and working groups. So we've got to the point now where we've done the reporting for the last couple of years, done their GHG baseline emissions calculations. You can download this report, or I think Charlotte will put it into the chat. This will give you an idea of how the Sustainable Development Goals have been aligned and what CHH have done to embed sustainability across the organisation. And as I've said to you already, this is a journey and not a destination. CHH are on the journey, but what they've done is they've embraced circular economy thinking. So they now have life cycle solutions, which is absolutely amazing to see, and to see what they're doing to have this positive impact. They're keeping materials out of landfill at the moment, which is just great, and in massive quantities as well. So some really great work being done by CHH. So take a look at that report. That's in the manufacturing space, and they offer solutions as well. And the other company, this is another company we've worked with for a number of years. This is the third impact report that we've done for them. So you can access the other two from our website. But the P&M group are in construction. They have several divisions, so we've done their carbon reporting across those divisions. They've really embraced sustainability. We first went in a few years ago, and the senior leadership team wanted to do this. It's a very values-led organisation, completely values-led, third generation company. They live and breathe their values. But they hadn't articulated it all, and they really wanted to do it properly. So Wylde has been supporting them for the last few years to help them to do this. And now they've got, a complete sustainability working group, really pushing ahead, really influencing their supply chains. They're on step 7 and have been for some time on the staircase, just because of the great work they do. So take a look at their report as well. And I'm not suggesting that if you're an SME in particular, I know we've got some sole traders on this webinar today, that you do all of this stuff. Just cherry pick, look at best practice and think, how can I embed that into my business? How can I use that? And start to use it in how we're progressing on this journey. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on the next steps, and then hopefully we'll have 10 minutes or so for Q&A, questions that you might have. You might want to start putting some of those in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer. I'm not the font of all knowledge. I'm running this webinar on behalf of Wylde Connections, so I am going to talk about our services. So this is a blatant plug for Wylde Connections. We are an end-to-end sustainability consultancy, but our vision and mission is to help as many businesses as we possibly can to get on this journey and to have positive impacts. So whether or not you work with Wylde, I still want to share all the information we can. I want to network, I want to collaborate. We want to really get engaged with businesses of all sizes. We work with universities. I'm an industrial fellow at Aston University. We work with several universities helping to deliver sustainability services and solutions. We help companies also to get support from universities and other business organisations like Innovate UK. So we work with the Knowledge Transfer Partnerships team. So wherever we can, whether you or not you work with us, we'll try and signpost to get you the best support that you can to get you on this journey. If we can all collectively take action, even if we all collectively take smaller actions, the impact is much bigger. The positive impacts are much greater. So this is why we've done an end-to-end service. We want to kind of help wherever we can. We run accredited training courses for ICEP, which is the Institute for Sustainability and Environmental Professionals. They've changed their name recently. So we run accredited workshops for them if you want a sustainability qualification for this. We do strategy development. At the very basics, we do diagnostics and GHG emissions. We can do any of the reporting, and we also do green comms. We've recently just partnered with a comms agency in London to really enhance what we offer on the comms side of things so that businesses can avoid the greenwashing. The danger at the moment is that if you make claims and you don't back them up with the evidence and data, you may fall foul of greenwashing, and there is legislation against that no matter what size of business you are. So you need to be really careful and really understand that landscape. So we're working with a company to help businesses not fall foul of those laws. And we do coaching and mentoring as well. And we do a lot of the technical stuff like the life cycle assessments and environmental product declarations, should your organisation need any of that. I just want to do a little plug on our diagnostics and baseline emissions. We have a progress checker. If you wanted to just test it and see where you are on your business, you've seen the staircase, it's based on the staircase. So if you just do your progress checker, suggest you do that. It's a light version of our Emberglass ESG diagnostic. And just to give you an indication, the Emberglass ESG diagnostic tool, for those of you that are SMEs, our smaller businesses on this call, we've deliberately kept that low cost and accessible, and we're deliberately keeping our emissions baseline and calculations as low cost as we possibly can. We do use a software platform that's very robust, but we're keeping that very, very competitive. So I'd be happy to have a discovery call with any of you if you just want to explore that. I'm not going to do any hard sell. If you want to work with us, you can work with us. If you want to talk about training, we're also working in partnership with a number of organisations delivering leadership training, technical training, and the professional qualifications that I've just mentioned to you. These are my contact details. I'm just going to leave that on for a couple of seconds. We have a LinkedIn group. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will invite you into the Sustainability Strategy for Business LinkedIn group. We're trying to get that a lot more interactive, so do come along and join that. And you can put questions in there, you can share best practice, you can share where you are on your journey. Let's try and get a community going where we're all talking about embedding sustainability across our operations. So do come along and help other companies in their supply chains to do best practice. If you've come across something that works really well and it can help others on this journey, then please do share that. We're all in this together. We're all facing these threats that I've spoken about. We also all want to take advantage of the commercial opportunities as well. So are there opportunities for networking and collaboration? I'm joining a couple of businesses together at this point in time where I can see real benefit. I can see the synergies. They work in the utilities water sector, and I can see they're not competitive at all, but they're both in the same sectors, and joined together they could achieve some really great things. So just in the process of doing that introduction. I have to share this with you because we're part of the West Midlands Business Festival, and I'd like to say a huge thank you to the festival. It's great. It grows year on year. It's a really great series of events. We're just one small part of that. Really great to get your feedback on this. So if you would like to give your feedback, that would be great. So yes, I think it's time for some Q&A now. So we've got, it's 18 minutes past 1. We've got a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'd like to open up the floor to you, and I will do my best to answer them. If you've got any technical questions, I may point you to a member of my team, but I can answer quite a few of the questions, so hopefully. So please do put your questions in the chat. If you do want to have a conversation with me, do book a discovery call with us, with either myself or a member of my team. Be more than happy. And even if you don't work with Wylde, I'm happy to signpost and guide as well. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Jane. Andrew from Solihull Council has put a couple of other events there that are part of the West Midlands Business Festival, so do take advantage of that as well. Great. Right, I've got a question here. How would you enthuse employees from top to the bottom? It needs key people at all levels. Great question, Andrew. Thank you for that. So it starts by engaging with them and involving them. So really understanding sustainability. But what we found in terms of really engaging staff is getting them immersed in this stuff. So gamification works really well. There's some really great tools out there where you can just get everybody engaged. Things like there's a game called Climate Fresk, which is a 3-hour game, and it's a card game, but everybody has to participate in it. So using gamification, but workshops, webinars, and I would say also within an organization, what we found really helpful is finding those ambassadors and champions. And I can guarantee you within every business, there will be somebody who's really passionate about this stuff and then may not be talking about it and starting initiatives around sustainability. It's basically understanding what sustainability is. So you might have, for example, a gardening club or something like that, but how can that then be turned into what are our impacts on biodiversity and nature, for example? So finding your champions, finding your advocates, and really getting those on board, and the enthusiasm then is infectious and it spreads. So Vicky's asked, how do we demonstrate our sustainability others in a way that makes sense and helps us to secure work? Demonstrating sustainability to others comes back to being able to communicate what you're doing. So whether that's from your business and generating those reports, but talking about it in a way that's accessible as well. And hopefully, I hope today's been accessible for you. But, you know, just sharing best practice. There's lots of information out there on good practice, on positive stuff. We very often hear the negative things that are going on in the world, but there's a whole host of positive things that are happening, and people really like to engage with positive things as well. So demonstrating sustainability to others in a way that makes sense is just bringing it back to being human. You know, what are we doing? We engage with each other. We're social beings. So how can we interact with each other and talk about some of these issues in an accessible way? Sarah, you made an interesting point there, that getting the data to meet your targets. And one of the things, because you're a growing organisation, you've grown quite rapidly, getting that data is one of the key challenges right now. And because you're feeling that as a growing organisation and trying to get that from your supply chain and within your business, comes back to the nub of what this webinar is all about, is about gathering that data and being credible and putting those processes in place. And it doesn't happen overnight. So you get what you can now. Look at where you are now, which is what the staircase is all about. Gather where you are now, see what position you're in, do the gap analysis, look at what you need, and then plan ahead. At the moment, we've got a period of grace. So unless you're having to report on a mandatory basis, and even then you've got a little bit of grace, if you can demonstrate that you're really serious about this stuff and you're gathering the data and you've got good intention to do this, you're stating your aims, but you're backing it by, these are our actions, this is what we're going to do, and there's a KPI behind it, there's a certain amount of grace on that. So it's being very transparent and very honest about where you are and what you're going to be doing. But a lot of businesses are already doing this stuff. They're already doing a lot already. You might not have done your calculations yet, but certainly on the social side, there's probably a lot you're already doing. And if you're a manufacturing business, you've probably got, you know, all your environmental processes in place, and you're handling your waste management. All of those things will probably already be in place. We've got a few minutes left. Thank you, Andrew, for that. We're pleased to be working with you on developing your sustainability plan and preparing for the future. Great business. Okay. Great. Okay. I think thank you for all your comments and questions. Thank you for participating. I think that brings us to a close. I think I've answered the questions that were posed. But if you have any further questions, then do get in touch with me. Do join our group. Happy to have a discovery call. Happy to answer questions. Do take a look at our website. Do download all the resources that we've put on this webinar, and make good use of those as well to help you on your journey. And thank you for joining us today. And once again, thank you to West Midlands Business Festival for giving us this opportunity to talk about sustainability. And yeah, have a great rest of the week, everybody. We're now going to close the session. Thank you.